La promesa de que mientras tú
What? What's it called? That's all. Okay. I'm on now? Okay, I told Tech to call this YouTube James Joyce's Ulysses, Carl Jung, and me. And instead, he just put up the name of James Joyce's novel, Ulysses. What I intend to do here is give you a sample of Ulysses. Because I know if you haven't cracked the book and tried it, you feel guilty about this. You know that this is the most famous modern novel, and that many people consider it to be a great work of art. Let me read you what Carl Jung said about it. Ulysses is a book which pours along for 735 pages, a stream of time of 735 days, which all consist in one single and senseless every day of every man. The completely irrelevant 16th day of June 1904 in Dublin, a day on which, in all truth, nothing happens. The stream begins in the void and ends in the void. In all of this, perhaps one single, immensely long and excessively complicated Strindbergian pronouncement upon the essence of human life, and one which, to the reader's dismay, is never finished. Perhaps it does touch upon the essence of life, but quite certainly it touches upon life's 10,000 surfaces and their 100,000 color gradations. As far as my glance reaches, there are in those 735 pages no obvious repetitions, and not a single hallowed island where the long-suffering reader may come to rest. There is not a single place where he can seat himself drunk with memories, and from which he can happily consider the stretch of the road he has covered, be it 100 pages or even less. But no, the pitiless and uninterrupted stream rolls by, and its velocity of precipitation grows in the last 40 pages, so it sweeps away even the marks of punctuation. It thus gives cruelest expression to that emptiness which is both breathtaking and stifling, which is under such tension, or is so filled to bursting as to grow unbearable. This thoroughly hopeless emptiness is the dominant note of the whole book. It not only begins and ends in nothingness, but it consists of nothing but nothingness. It is all infernally nugatory, worthless. Of course, now here's the comment of the editor that's quoting Carl Jung. Of course, this outrage over hopelessness and nothingness is only natural for a man who believes that, quote, man cannot stand a meaningless life. And that, quotes, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. Okay, I second the emotion. Okay. I am going to satisfy and assuage your feelings of guilt about not having experienced even one page of Ulysses, and I'm sure you feel the way I did, that I need to look at this book because it's so famous, so lauded by the critics. For every person who felt anguish from reading Ulysses, as Carl Jung did, there is someone who is very effusive in his praise and thinks this is absolutely the greatest book of the 20th century. I'm going to give you a sample of it, and I'm going to give you my response to it. So it's going to be a very small sample. Don't worry about that. Okay. I mean, so many great figures have commented on Ulysses. I have it somewhere here where I can access it. Wait a minute. Yes, I know where. Wait a minute. It's on my Kindle. Just give me a second here. There we go. No. I was looking at another book. Okay, I better find this now. Here we go. All right. This is the first paragraph of Ulysses. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead. That would be the top of the stairs. Bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him by the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, in troibo ad altere Dei, which I assume means an offering at the altar of God. Halted, he peered down the dark winding stairs and called up coarsely, "Come up, Kinch. Come up, you fearful Jesuit." Solemnly, he came forward and mounted the round gun set. This is Stephen Dedalus now. He calls Kinch. He faced about and blessed gravely thrice the tower, the surrounding. No, that's still Buck Mulligan, pretending to be a priest. Solemnly, he came forward and mounted the round gun rest. He faced about and blessed gravely thrice the tower, the surrounding country, and the awaking mountains. Then, catching sight of Stephen Dedalus, he bent towards him and made rapid crosses in the air, gurgling in his throat and shaking his head. Stephen Dedalus, displeased and sleepy, leaned his arms on the top of the staircase and looked coldly at the shaking, gurgling face that blessed him, equine in length, and at the light, untonsured hair, grained and hued like pale oak. Buck Mulligan peeped an instant under the mirror and then covered the bowl smartly. "Back to barracks," he said sternly. He added in the preacher's tone, "For this, O dearly beloved, is the genuine Christian, body and soul and blood and ounce. Slow music, please. Shut your eyes, gents. One moment. A little trouble about those white corpuscles. Silence all." He peered sideways up and gave He peered sideways up and gave a long, low whistle of call, then paused a while in rapt attention, his even white teeth glistening here and there with gold points. Christostomos. 2 strong, shrill whistles answered through the calm. He called that word out. "No. Thanks, old chap," he cried briskly. "That will do nicely. Switch off the current, will you?" "No. I have no idea what he's talking about now." So what this means is if you read this book, you're going to have an annotation, an annotated book edition with 1,000 footnotes for the 735 pages. You're going to have 1,000 footnotes. I find the book to be insufferably effeminate and frivolous. Effeminate. It's beyond effeminacy. One of these two men calls the other love or something like that. And why would he? When they're talking about blowing their noses and one guy lending his handkerchief to the other guy. "Lend us a loan of your nose rag to wipe my razor." That's your handkerchief. Stephen suffered him to pull out and hold up on show by its corner a dirty, crumpled handkerchief. Buck Mulligan wiped the razor blade neatly, then gazing over the handkerchief, he said, "The bard's nose rag, the poet's handkerchief. A new art color for our Irish poets, snot green. You can almost taste it, can't you?" No, he rhapsodizes about this now, this theme. He mounted to the parapet again and gazed out over Dublin Bay, his fair oak-pale hair stirring slightly. I mean, I would not write about a man's hair that way. "God," he said quietly, "isn't the sea what Elgie calls it? A gray, sweet mother?" That's Algernon Swinburne, who was a homosexual, of course. "The snot green sea, the scrotum tightening sea, epi oinopa ponton," that's Greek, which I don't know. Daedalus, the Greeks, I must teach you. You must read them in the original. Thalata, Thalata, she is our great sweet mother. Come and look. All right. The tone of it, the frivolity, the endless frivolity, the gayness of it, it's repulsive to me. At the same time, I appreciate some of the descriptive writing, and I appreciate it. It's absolutely brilliant. So the man who was shaving himself. See, I'm not interested in any of this. This doesn't interest me. You know, my first principle of art is art must be interesting. I'm not interested in a description, no matter how poetic and frivolous, of someone's shaving or someone's hair. It's not interesting in the slightest. Okay, so Buck Mulligan says this to Stephen Douglas. "The aunt thinks you killed your mother," he said. "That's why she won't let me have anything to do with you." "Someone killed her," Stephen said gloomily. You could have knelt down, damn it, Kinch," says Buck Mulligan. Oh, I'm sorry. You could have knelt down, damn it, Kinch, when your dying mother asked you," Buck Mulligan said. "I'm Hyperborean as much as you." I mean, it's cold. But to think of your mother begging you with her last breath to kneel down and pray for her, and you refused, there is something sinister in you. He broke off and lathered again, lightly, his farther cheek. The cheek was farther from the mirror. I don't care about that. That's a tolerant smile curled his lips. He's tolerating Daedalus for doing this to his mother. And I don't know whether Daedalus is a Jesuit priest or a brother, what he is. But Buck Mulligan called him a Jesuit. But a lovely mummer, he murmured to himself. Kinch, the loveliest mummer of them all. I used to know what a mummer was. I can't think of it. So you gotta have an annotation. You gotta be reading. He shaved evenly and with care and silence. Seriously, I don't give a goddamn how somebody shaved. That's of no interest to me. He shaved evenly and with care, in silence. Seriously, why is that noteworthy? Stephen, an elbow rested on the jagged granite. I mean, do I care? Whether he rested an elbow on the jagged granite. Stephen, an elbow rested on the jagged granite, leaned his palm against his brow, and gazed at the fraying edge of his shiny black coat sleeve. What the hell? What do I care what he's doing when he's talking? It was not the pain of love fretted at his heart. Silent. Now this is really fantastic writing right here. Descriptive writing. Silently in a dream, she had come to him after her death, her wasted body within its loose brown grave clothes, giving off an odor of wax and rosewood, her breath that had been bent upon him, mute, reproachful, a faint odor of wetted ashes. Across the threadbare coverage, he saw the sea hailed as a great sweet mother by the well-fed voice beside him. This is a stream of consciousness, and he goes from the dream of his mother haunting him for not praying over her dying body to back to the fat boy and shaving. So it has. I talked about this, I think, in another YouTube. I talked about Ulysses. Jung sums it up pretty much, and I've given you a sample of it. I have something to offer here, which is new because I am the only philosopher of the novel that I know of. I have a philosophy of the novel, which draws on my interest in evolution and an interest in the evolution of art, human evolution. Have you ever noticed that when someone starts talking and you can't figure out what the hell they're talking about, it annoys the hell out of you. You say, get to the fucking point, right? That's our genes, that's our DNA talking. See, we were evolved to use language to communicate, not to befuddle one another, not to delight and titulate one another. My DA is asking James Joyce, when I'm reading this, is, what are you trying to tell me this? What are you trying to tell me? Why is any of this of interest to me? Why should I be interested in this? All this frivolous banter, this gay banter. Then we learned that one of the men lent clothes to Stephen Daedalus, and he asked him about the clothes. It's just extremely gay. I've never read that anywhere. People are afraid to say that. Why? They don't want to be labeled a homophobe. When I was when Ken and I were best friends, he was living with his partner of many, many years who died of AIDS. Okay? And that, I never had any problem with Ken. I mean, he didn't act effeminate, and he repudiated any being homosexual to me, which is cool. I never, asked him about it, wasn't interested in it. But my point is, I'm not a homophobe. My best friend for 30, 40 years was living with another man who died of AIDS, right? Yeah, I bought a painting from Ken, a Renaissance painting he restored that a friend of his, who was a wealthy plastic surgeon, socialite in South Florida, had given him this painting, right? I think it's the best painting of the Battle of Lepanto. It's a post-Renaissance painting. It's like a century after the Renaissance. I think his painting that I bought from Ken is the best painting of the Battle of Lepanto, and it's probably 100 of them. I've never seen anything like mine. Yeah, so I'm not a homophobe, but I can't stand this writing. I mean, I just abominate it. What is it? It's a showcase. Hey, Marilyn Monroe didn't agree with this. She read the whole thing and reread it. So some people are just delighted, I just find this the most delightful thing they've ever read in their life. But how many people, though? Gone with the Wind sold 35 million copies and it's still selling. Ulysses is also still selling, but in 100 years it hasn't sold 1 million copies. Okay? Let's get back to my philosophy of the novel as a aesthete and a philosopher of art and the beautiful. Let's get back to that. I believe I have written the best novel since Don Quixote, and I'm going to read a little bit of it to you to contrast it with the Ulysses. Just a little bit beginning. God, what's wrong here? Get out of this one book and find my other. I'm on Kindle here, struggling. Come on. Huh. Okay. Oh, I got it now. Okay. All right. Rossetti. Volume 1. Don't ask me how I got to Tampa. It's embarrassing. It's a long story that begins with my childhood and being Italian, D.G. Rossetti, and believing it meant something special. Here's the short version. I was at a CPA convention in Chicago. I had just passed the CPA exam and was working for a small firm in Cleveland. I met Gino Scaglione at the convention, a snowy-haired octogenarian. He said he had a small practice in Tampa and was dying of cancer and cared about his clients. He didn't want to sell his practice, he wanted someone to take it over. It could be the beginning of a lucrative practice for a young man like me. Besides, Tampa was an Italian city and I would feel comfortable there. He had an ingenuous, warm-hearted manner that disarmed me. I flew down a couple weeks later and met the Toscanos, his most important client, who had a seafood restaurant on Tampa Bay. We looked at their computer-generated books. It impressed me that a mom-and-pop business could generate $300,000 in sales. Gino said they were paying him $2,000 a month, but he was failing and could not work much longer. He had other clients, and I would make more than my salary in no time. I wasn't enjoying my work in Cleveland. I felt like an intern and wasn't making diddly. I thought I heard opportunity knocking and flew down a month later. The Toscanos picked me up at the airport and drove me to their restaurant. They were in their 60s, frantic, almost hysterical. The IRS was there, poring over their records. The restaurant was a vast, sprawling affair on a causeway. It was packed. It had to do $100,000 a month. I had been had. The Toscanos introduced me to the IRS agent in charge of the audit. He asked for a meeting in my office. That would be Scaglione's. That night, after the restaurant closed, Louis and Polly and I sat at the table drinking café con leche. They went on for an hour about opening 30 years before and never being audited. They thanked Gino for this. He had been doing their books and tax returns. Now I would be doing them. No thanks. They thought I was going to talk to the auditors and they were going to go away. All because they, the Toscanos, were patriots. They loved America and had always been very scrupulous about paying their taxes. I said I would find out what the IRS wanted to do. I asked who they had working the cash register. Grandmother was working the cash register. In my hotel that night, I thought about flying back to Cleveland. I knew a couple firms that might give me a job. I had gotten good grades at Ohio State, worked some part-time accounting jobs, and won a modest scholarship. I graduated without debt, and this impressed the old-timers who were used to seeing graduates owing $100,000. I even managed to save a little, but I was too proud to go back to Cleveland. I was supposed to meet with Gino the next morning, but why? I thought I knew what his practice consisted of and wasn't interested. Better to start with a clean slate. No sleepless nights. I decided not to see him again. The next morning, I sat in a cafe in Ybor City, looking for a room in the classifieds. The cafe was full of old men speaking Spanish and Italian. A large cream-colored table in a nearby corner was reserved for the editor of the Ybor City newspaper. A plaque on the wall showed him as a white-haired man in a white suit and indicated he had been dead for years. The sound of Italian made me think of my childhood in Cleveland and my comical great-uncles, the Italian POWs, two brothers, patriots, who ran for the British lines when they saw Rommel's panzers coming to rescue them, kicking up a cloud of sand. Viva Italia, viva il Duce, without us, take us to New York, per favore. I imagined them running with their hands raised. I thought of the Toscanos' audit, first in 30 years, and my mind wandered to my work in Cleveland. The IRS finally catching up with abusive tax shelters, clients at rest. I would refer the IRS agent to the cemetery. Then a wizened little Sicilian grandfather was talking Italian to me. "You are from Italy," he said. "I knew from your walk." I told him La Storia Mia, abbreviated. He introduced me all around and drove me to his sisters, who had an apartment on the bay. This became my new home, a garage apartment. The sisters, Mrs. Cacciatore, lived in the ramshackle two-story frame next door with her boarders. Beautiful vista of the bay the next morning, woken by rosy-fingered dawn, birds making a racket in my window. I made myself a cup of coffee and looked out over the glowing waters. Now all I needed was a means of keeping body and soul together. I decided not to hurry, not again. I thought I'd look around a little. This is at the other end of the spectrum from Ulysses. Every word, every single word contributes something to the plot. I develop it very slowly. Another writer would say, hey, I got sick of my job in Cleveland. I met somebody at a convention, and he invited me to come down and look at his practice. So I flew down the next day. All right, so Notice how I'm using language, words. I've talked about this before. My philosophy of prose is that words should evoke a world and disappear. I believe I have written the first invisible prose. You can't do two things. You can't show off. You can't write virtuosic prose that makes everybody, stop and take notice. I mean, that breaks the spell. See, my words are used for one purpose, and that is to evoke this world that's unfolding. Okay? The plot. I mean, it's just, it's a very exciting plot. It starts with him being tricked, you might say. Tricked, Something that, all Americans know this. We've all experienced it. If something's too good to be true, it's never true. And this is just one of millions of examples, all right? I'm potentiating a novel more than any novelist in history has potentiated since Cervantes. I am giving you a serious study and exploration of the world you live in. That's what my novel does. A young person might not know that this is a common practice to have grandmother man the cash register. Of course, they're siphoning off cash. We already know their computer-generated books indicate that they're going to owe taxes on $300,000 a year. I'm going to be doing their taxes and their income tax returns. And really, just by looking at the restaurant, how big it was, he knows that, this is more like $1.2 million, and that they've been evading, millions of dollars in tax over the last 30 years. He knows this. See, our DNA wants to know what happened. They don't want to know. They're not interested in Buck Mulligan, the condition of the clothes that Buck Mulligan has lent to Stephen Douglas, or Buck Mulligan's frivolous, prancing about, pretending to be a priest. It's sickening. It's so frivolous and effeminate. See, but nobody has the guts to say this. This is an important part of your education, your college education. And we live in a world of phony people, disingenuous people. Okay? Where you can't call a spade a spade. You can't even use that expression because people would say, well, you're talking about black people because the spade's black. And no, it's a metaphor. It doesn't just apply to them. But see, that's the sensitivity. I'm telling you stuff you already know. What am I doing? Okay, so let's read on and see how the plot is developed. Okay? See, your novel should grab people in the first paragraph and not let them go. Okay? Why can't the reader get away here? Because he's invested. He knows all about this young man. He's come from Cleveland to Tampa, this exotic, city that's a lot like New Orleans, the Latin Quarter of New Orleans. Ybor City was our Latin quarter. All right, see, I lived here for 34 years. This is my world. I drank in the Tropicana, not every morning, but probably most. And drank cafe con leche, and I remember when Roland Montega, I think is his name, the mayor of Ybor City, and habitué of the Tropicana, he died, and they set aside his table, this big cream-colored table, huge round table, and put his all this memorabilia on the wall about him. It's still there, and they just closed the. It was just closed because Trump wimped out on us. Damn it! He allowed this to happen. I mean, he destroyed, an icon, the icon of 7th Avenue, Ybor City. He destroyed it by wimping out, by thinking, "Oh, I can't do this. I'm going to lose the re-election if I do this." God, he's got to make this up to us now. Damn it! I mean, he knows that he wimped out retrospectively. It infuriates me to think that I went back to Ybor City, to Tampa last summer, and it was so hot I almost passed out, and visited my son and daughter, and I went to the Tropicana. It was open, and had what I used to have, Cuban toast and cafe con leche. I remember that the Philip Morris, the little man that said, "Call for Philip Morris" in the commercials. Okay. I mean, that was 10, 20 years he was doing it. That commercial was running with. He drank coffee with us in the morning, and he was a little tiny guy. I could see him, with his porter's cap, that's heartbreaking. The Tropicana closing. Maybe I'm going to go this winter, and maybe I can start a movement and raise some money and buy it. I want to get people to come there and be interested, and support it. Okay, so he's back in New York. He's been in the following paragraph. Now he's back in Ybor City, where the Tropicana is located on 7th Avenue. I mean, that's our Basin Street. I spent the day in Ybor City, loafing and buying things for my apartment. Bought a sangria pitcher and spent hours in a giant cigar factory that had been converted into an antique mall, and bought some early 20th century orange grate art to put on the walls. It was the first week of January, luxurious, cool, sunny weather. I finished up around 5, my meandering, shadows of evening falling. Sat on the terrace of a restaurant and smoked a cigar, which I only did on special occasions. I felt great, 1,000 pounds lighter. I realized that I had used Scaglione as an excuse to quit my job. I never took him seriously and wasn't surprised by what happened. Beyond that, I wanted to leave accounting. I had tried it and didn't like it. Too much of it was a variation on the Toscano theme. At the other end of the spectrum was Enron, hiding behind Arthur Andersen, then taking the giant accounting firm down with it. Perhaps I could get a job as a controller for a small company and move from there into management. A small band marched by, its brass flashing, followed by a train of revelers dressed in the brown khaki uniforms of Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders, 1898. I am a history buff of sorts who always pauses to read historical markers. 7th Avenue had become a poor man's Basin Street. I imagine it full of bands and marching soldiers returning from the Spanish-American War, the crowds cheering, the water a few blocks away. In those days, people would stand on the roofs of cigar factories watching for the ivory clipper ships to sail into Port Tampa, laden with tobacco from Havana. I was lost in this reverie when I realized that a man was talking to me. He was asking me if I would watch his attaché case a minute. That's what he called it. He looked like the man boy in the old Philip Morris cigarette commercial who cries, "Call for Philip Morris." I said sure and began reading a La Gazzetta, read the entire section about locals getting married and belles attending local balls. A half hour passed and the man did not return. I took the steel attaché case and looked for him inside. Walked through a cigar store, checked a wine bar, asked a couple waiters. No one had seen him. I thought I would leave it. Identified someone who looked like the manager but didn't like his looks and returned to my table. Black outside. I drank another cup of coffee, tarried an hour, and left, taking a cab to my apartment. Look how much you know about this guy. I mean, I've described his character. Entire novels, 500 pages, don't describe a character, an important character, this well as I have. In what is it, 6 or 7 pages. The next morning, I put a notice in the Lost and Found. Stayed in my apartment a couple of days, reading and hoping to get a call. I felt for the guy, knew how he must be feeling. I had done the same thing myself. I hoped he'd have the sense to check the Lost and Found. No calls. I bought an answering machine to free myself from the phone. The next day passed without calls or messages. I began taking long walks and exploring the neighborhood. Mrs. Cacciatore's was just west of Bayshore, a 3 or 4 mile crescent with a continuous sidewalk, which, according to Guinness, was the world's longest continuous sidewalk. On evenings and weekends, it came alive with people jogging or roller skating or pushing perambulators. They lived in the grand Bayshore mansions or in the neighborhood that stretches for blocks behind it, Palmacia, home of Tampa society. In my walks, I discovered a trove of architectural curiosities, epitomes of the 19th and early 20th century. Oddly, one of the most curious was right next door to Mrs. Cacciatore's, a freshly painted Georgian colonial, austere and white. I found something a little sinister in the orientation of its massive 3-story marble columns set off by well-manicured grounds. It was hard to imagine an owner so wealthy he could invest a princely sum in this feature with no hope of recouping it when he sold the house. On the 5th day after obtaining the attaché case, I was sitting in a chair behind my apartment watching the sun set on the bay, night's gorgeous mansions, when the strange little man appeared beside me, startling me. He gave me a small white envelope, turned on his heels, and vanished, swallowed up by the shadows as if by another dimension. Inside the envelope was an invitation embossed in gold to a party the following night, given by a Mr. M. Pilar. I didn't know the name, but recognized the address as my next-door neighbors. This gave me a chill. I had been tested. I gathered my thoughts. I wondered how much money was inside. Probably a lot. I was not going to a drug dealer's party. I went next door and knocked. A maid answered a moment later, a Latin woman. I didn't want to leave it with her and asked to see Mr. Pilar. He wasn't home. Was I the young man who lived next door? I was expected at the party. She didn't want to take responsibility for the attaché case. Would I please bring it with me? Okay, so I submit that that's as good as any James Joyce short story, any short story, Chekhov, any short story ever written. Okay? Let's refresh. Let's go back. See, I'm going over material I've gone over to some extent in previous YouTubes, but I just don't trust you to go back and read them. So now that I've got people's attention, I'm going back now and I'm giving you my philosophy of the novel, showing you how I executed using my philosophy in this novel. If you could find a better first chapter, a more interesting first chapter, engaging first chapter. See, the first chapter has to engage you, so you can't get away. cannot get away, okay? That's what it has to do. Every first chapter has to do that. When you write your first novel, remember that. It's not enough to get them to finish the first chapter. You have to make them crave the second chapter, okay? So Trump would call the first chapter, he might call it low energy. I think that would be unfair. Low energy. But I'm serious about this. Show me a first chapter that is as good as this, please. Other than Don Quixote. I can't think of the word right now. I concede that, I am not Miguel de Cervantes. I mean, that is really great art, on the level of Shakespeare. All right, so please, it's not quite a short story, is it? Because if I left you there, you'd be very angry, because you would want to know whether he was going to go to the party or not, wouldn't you? I mean, that's what you want to know right now. You want to know if he's going to go to the party. And, even though he's told you he's not doing it, the guy they can come and get their money. You're not going to the party. You don't believe it. You don't believe it. See, you're not sure. You want to find out if it really happens. So I'll read just a little bit of chapter 2 to show you how dramatically I switch from low energy to the highest possible energy in prose. Chapter 2. I felt that Pilar had made a fool of me, having me babysit his drug money. If he wanted it, he knew where it was. Around 9 the next evening, I was sitting in my apartment reading when someone knocked on the door. Probably Pilar, I thought, come for his money. I planned to express my relief that he had found my notice. If he asked me to the party, I would beg off. I opened the door and my heart stopped. A Latin faun with brown eyes of liquid crystal. Her smile dazzled me. She shook my hand, a teen angel, bubbling, giggling. I thought she'd break into a cheer. Why was she looking around the apartment? She was looking for the attaché case. I had hidden it. We exchanged introductions. She started moving around, looking. I noticed the concupiscible figure, the movement, thought of a fish cast ashore by the angler, wiggling, jumping, slithering. It was too much for me. She seemed to fill up my little apartment. And then I noticed a cascade of chestnut hair. Shave, shave, she cried. Can I see your clothes? My clothes, I asked. Then she was in the clothes closet. The attaché case wasn't there, so I let her rummage and went into the bathroom to shave. Where did you get these old man's clothes? She asked. They're Ivy League. You can't wear any of this. I laughed. All right, I won't come. You can wear these jeans. What about the sports coat? I asked. I guess. Here it is. Icky. I heard her scurrying, searching. She'd never find it. How was I going to get it back to Pilar? The little stinker actually got under the bed and pulled it out. I heard it dragging. No, I cried, wiping my face with a towel and running out. She was kneeling beside it, open, stuffed with hundreds, her hands full. I had to shake the money loose, holding her slender wrists gently. What are you doing? I asked. It's hundreds of thousands. Let's spend it together. I laughed and shut the case. Does your father know you're here? I asked. He sent me. Then her cell was ringing, and she started talking to a girl. A moment later, she said she had to run and would meet me at the party. Promise to come, she said. Sure, I said, and she was out the door. I sat down and tried to gather my thoughts. Ask me no more, whither do stray the golden atoms of the day, for in pure love heaven did prepare those powers to enrich your hair. I refused to believe her father was a drug lord. She was a preppy, maybe 18. Could you fall in love with a girl for her hair? Okay, so now your questions are answered. Now you know that he's going to the party, and you anticipate that this is going to now the real. See, it's like the novel unfolds. He goes to Tampa. That's one. He finds out why. He finds out what's really going on with the story about the Toscanos, etc. He decides not to fly back to Cleveland, to stay in Tampa and look around for a job. Okay, and in so doing, he goes to Ybor City and he has cafe con leche and the Tropicana, and then 5 unfolding. At 5, he meets the little Sicilian grandfather that drives him to Mrs. Cacciatore's, and he ends up renting her garage apartment on Tampa Bay. Then 6 is life. You know, we have these scenes that are where are they leading us? See, these scenes are not pointless. Each scene is leading you closer to the answer, which is where's he going to end up? What's going to happen? Where is this novel? What's the setting of this novel going to be? Okay, and we don't know until the beginning of the 2nd chapter. Now we know this guy is the hook is in his mouth. He can't get away. See? The trap door has closed, has opened, and the alligator's down there waiting for him. Okay? We know that now that this is what the novel's going to be about. We have a very strong suspicion of it. We'll find out shortly. We know we're going to find out shortly. We don't know that 100%, but we suspect it now. So now where we just had these unfolding steps, now we think we really are home. Here's the setting of the novel. He's going to stay in Tampa. What's the backstory here? What's the backstory? Think about it. Please tell me with a comment right now. I'll give you a minute what the backstory is. What's going on after he moves into the garage apartment? Something's going on that leads to the next door neighbor testing him with a valet case. What's going on? What's the motive? What's behind all this? See? Well, use your mind, think when you're reading a novel. Okay. Another minute here to tell me what the backstory is. How did all this happen? Yeah. Okay. Tex got the comments in the other room. I don't know how to access them. All right. So Mrs. Cacciatore's been living forever next door, obviously. An old lady living in a boarding house with her boarders. And what a juicy bit of gossip. I mean, Mrs. Cacciatore, for the first time in her life, has a glamorous boarder, a CPA, an Italian CPA, okay, who has moved in. And she tells the Pillars the man doesn't have a job. Okay? He doesn't have a job. And she had found, where did she find this out? From her brother, who interviewed Rossetti in the Tropicana. Okay? So Rossetti said he told him the story of Mia, the story of his life. So he knows about him coming down here and not having a job, doesn't he? So now Mrs. Cacciatore is telling these people, these wealthy people, there's a young CPA living in my garage apartment who doesn't have a job. He's a charming fellow. So obviously they're very seriously interested in employing him, or they wouldn't put all that money in a valet case. They probably had it wired somehow so that they could find it. But they want somebody who has his credentials that they can trust. And that's why they had Pedro leave him with a valet case. So this is like, it's like a little novel in itself, right there. The 10 pages. It's got as much plot as Ulysses. It has more plot than Ulysses has. There's 735 pages. But my 10 pages has more plot. And that's what our DNA is craving. That's what I mean. If you're gonna write a novel, it's a long story about life. Tell us what happened. Don't just this gay banter and trying to be as frivolous as you can. I mean, that's not gonna. There are exceptions. 1 million people bought the book in 100 years. Okay? There are people. Marilyn Monroe, she loved the book. I abominate it. I can't stand it. It's just. Woo! Gives me the creeps. I mean, it's all this. Well, they talk about milk in the first chapter. First, they talk about the clothing that they will let one another. What an evil Jesuit Stephen Douglas is. And then they talk about milk. And they're so delighted, by the subject. It's just creeps me out the door, as the kids say. I can't stand it. There are people, and they're half the people, most people are in my camp. But maybe you will do double and triple flips over Ulysses. Maybe you should try it. But now at least you don't have to feel guilty anymore that you never attempted to read Ulysses. Okay? I want to hear from you about my claim to have written the best first chapter. The best, material dealing with the setting of the scene, that you're going to find in all of world literature. I don't think you're going to find anything better than this. Yeah, please let me know. And don't be afraid to be as critical as you want to. Serve it and give it to me blood raw, my brothers. Okay, great. I hope I brought a little sunshine and fun into your day. I hope to see you soon. Don't forget, please, to I can't turn this off. Don't forget to subscribe, please. Tech, turn it off.